Good morning, everyone, and welcome to East Renfrewshire Council Cabinet meeting of Thursday, 2nd of November 2023. Going straight on to the agenda, item number 1, apologies, everyone is here. Moving on to item number 2, declarations of interest. Are there any? None. So can we go on to item number 3, please, which is estimated revenue budget outturn 23-24, and this report will be taken by Margaret McCrossan. Thank you, Margaret.
Okay. Thanks, Leader. This report covers the revenue, income and expenditure against budget for the period up to the 31st of August this year. At the 31st of August, the net expenditure was actually £637,000 more than budget, but this is largely due to variances in timing of both expenditure and income, and it's not a position that we expect to continue throughout the year. Rather, on the basis of the latest information, a year-end underspend of £3.037 million, or 1% of our actual budget, is what we're forecasting. As the HRA, which is funded from rents, is currently forecasting to break even for the year, the underlying position on departmental budgets after adjusting for HRA also remains an underspend of £3.037 million. The reasons for all the various departmental variances are set out in the report, but just to go through the major variances, these relate to an ongoing welcome reduction in utility and food costs in 23-4, together with continued increased vacancies in some departments which are adding to the forecast underspend. We're also seeing continuing increased investment income as interest rates remain high, and present information also suggests that we won't use all of our centrally held contingency service restructuring budgets. In addition to all those, the figures this month reflect the receipt of £2 million of one-off income, and that relates to the successful settlement of a historic VAT appeal. And this has been going on for very many years, not just in this council, but in many other councils across the country. However, all of those favourable variances are partly offset by reductions in the garden waste income and continuing pressure on housing benefits, as well as a forecast overspend in the HSCP due to increasing service demand, compounded by pressures relating to staff absence cover. The position I've outlined above, though, relates to normal operational budgets only. As well as that, we expect to cover £6.4 million of ongoing COVID pressures in the course of 23-24. But these will be addressed by using earmarked COVID government grant resources that were previously awarded to the Council. The figures that I've just quoted could still be subject to significant change. For example, if the current year's local government staff pay award is settled at a significantly different rate from what we've been budgeting for on the basis of latest information. And given the tight nature of the Council's current and future finances and the economic climate, we'll obviously continue to actively monitor the position and provide regular updates to Cabinet on our financial performance and our outturn forecasts. So just now, I would just ask you to approve the budget adjustments that are shown in the report, note the current financial position, and approve the various service adjustments that are in the notes to the tables in the report in front of you. If you've got any questions, myself and Paul Parsons, the Principal Accountant here, I'll do our best to answer those for you.
Thanks very much, Margaret, for that report. Any questions from Cabinet? Margaret, we've already had a lot of questions from me, and we've gone through a lot of the detail, and thanks for your time on that. I think it's important to note that we do have underspend in the year, which is helpful, particularly as we start planning for future years' budgets, and that is despite the significant pressures on the HSCP, which we're still working through in terms of how to resolve those issues. So that's good news. It's also good news to see some of the inflationary pressures starting to go backwards in terms of utility costs and food costs, which again hopefully will have an impact on future years as well. So that's very helpful news, and compared to this time last year, I think we're probably in a much better position in terms of our expectations of the outlook for the year. So thank you very much for a very detailed report and very detailed responses you gave to individual queries I had on that, which we resolved separately. So thank you for that. So if there's no other comments, can members approve? Note the forecast underlying general fund operational underspend of £3 million and the HRA operational outturn in line with budget. Members note the continued financial pressure on operational services arising from COVID-19 pandemic, and that it is expected to cover these from the COVID grant reserves. And members approve service environments and operational adjustments as set out in the notes on the tables on pages 15 to 32. Are we happy with those recommendations? I agree. Thank you very much. So moving on to item number 4, COVID Reserve, review and final proposals, report by Director of Business Operations and Partnerships, but I think this is going to be taken by Julie Breslin. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Leader. Today's paper provides an update on COVID reserves allocated in the 2023-2024 financial period and presents proposals for the final tranche of COVID reserves funds totalling £1.54 million.
Just pause till we work out what's happening. Sorry, Julie, for that slight interruption. Please continue.
No problem. So item 4 today is looking at COVID reserves allocated in the 2023-2024 financial period and presents proposals for the final tranche of COVID reserves funds totalling £1.54 million. In October 2022, Cabinet approved a series of funding proposals at just under £1.7 million, with a proportion of the activity to be delivered in the 23-24 period. In May 2023, a further £1.7 million was approved to support COVID recovery, and Annex 1 outlines the progress made through this funded activity. There's quite a lot covered in Annex 1, so I'll only provide some highlights here. East Renfrewshire Citizens Advice Bureau was supported with additional staffing capacity, with fuel and benefit advisor posts achieving a combined 372,000 financial gains.
I'm going to have to stop you for a minute, so I'm not sure what's happening outside.
So is somebody hoovering?
I don't know what it is.
It's a leaf.
Is it a leaf blower? Do you think we can go? Thank you.
So, Citizens Advice Bureau has been supported with additional staffing capacity, with fuel and benefit advisor posts achieving a combined 372,000 financial gains in the period up to August 2023. A dedicated older persons worker and a money advice and rights advisor who has dealt with a significant increase in referrals due to the cost of living crisis. Funding towards learning recovery in schools has supported 126 pupils with literacy and numeracy skills. We have seen progress in recovery across our communities, with cafes set up in the health centres, work to progress a community-led equality forum to re-engage marginalised individuals who are most affected by the pandemic, and targeted youth work activity to address antisocial behaviour resulting from young people missing key milestones and lacking support networks during lockdown. The underspend from the May 2022 and October 2023 activity currently sits at 244,000, and this may change with final reconciliations at year end. There has also been an additional 1.3 million unallocated from the wider COVID grant reserve, so the proposals presented here today are to the value of 1.54 million. It is proposed that nearly a third of the funding addresses the economic harms caused by the pandemic and will provide direct financial support aimed at 2,300 eligible children, vouchers to vulnerable families and specific young people at Christmas, discretionary payments for struggling tenants, and additional support for food dignity provision. Additional staffing resources have also been committed again to Citizens Advice Bureau, including extending the older persons post. You will see in Annex 2 that the other proposals will address organisational recovery, capacity building in communities and provide wellbeing interventions and support to our most vulnerable residents. You will also see that 687,000 has been earmarked towards HSCP contingency and support. The direct and indirect health harms caused by COVID have led to an increased level of complexity, frailty and vulnerability of service users and higher levels of referrals than previously. So at this time it is critical to ensure that HSCP staffing and service delivery is maintained. It's important to note that this is the final tranche of funding and there will be no further COVID reserve funds. Any ongoing areas of budgetary pressures will need to be met through strategic planning processes or other external funding. So Cabinet is asked today to note the progress made towards delivering the proposals from the COVID reserves outlined in Annex 1, approve the final allocation of the 1.54 million of COVID reserve, agree that any uncommitted underspend remaining in the COVID reserves are allocated to the HSCP to assist in-year budget pressures and COVID-related impact, and to delegate to the Director of Business Operations and Partnerships and Head of Accountancy in consultation with the Leader to exercise flexibility in the terms of these proposals. To welcome any questions you have in relation to the paper. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie, and hopefully you can hear our questions. Councillor Pragnall, would you like to start?
Thank you, Julie, and all the team.
Councillor Pragnall, can I suggest you speak close to the microphone?
I would just like to thank all the team for pulling this report together and the work they've done so far with the COVID reserve funding. I just want to highlight a few things that I think are really important. Certainly for this year, I know the go bags for domestic abuse survivors have been greatly appreciated and will assist many who are fleeing domestic violence. I know I met with one woman at a community event who said that she wouldn't be where she was today without the support of the council and the HSCP, so I think it's really important that we recognise this. Also, the support for fostering households. We know we've had a recent fostering campaign, and foster carers have been hit by the cost of living, and the young people they care for are often a bit more vulnerable and so do require a bit more support. So I think this is really important. I was at a community council last week and they were keen to see an update in the progress of the COVID reserves because they'd seen stuff last year online. So I'm really happy with the progress we made, and I think we have used this fund appropriately and sufficiently, and it is having impacts in their community. So I would just like to thank everyone involved. I know it's been across departmental with HSCP, environment, all departments pulling together and really supporting our residents.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pragnall. Do you want to come in? Are you okay? No.
Just thank you for that feedback, and we'll pass it on to the team.
Councillor Devlin.
Thanks. There have been successive cuts in recent years in terms of the community learning and development team, so that's been part of the challenge that we've had. But the team are really creative in terms of trying to access temporary funding sources. COVID has been very helpful to that team in terms of the funding sources we've had there. But previous to COVID and going forward, there are alternative funding sources that team are trying to use to shore up the service. In terms of the Barrhead antisocial behaviour issues, earlier this year we convened a multi-agency strategic group to look at that issue, and that involved community learning and development. The first meeting was chaired by me, and then that was handed off to be co-chaired by Raymond in social work and Jamie Reid. And there was a meeting of that group on Monday. That involves the police, it involves social work, education, community learning and development, community safety, etc. So all the partners round a table. Also involved the trust, because the Foundry were experiencing significant challenges at that point. We've worked really hard over the summer with a particular group of young people, and the COVID money has gone towards some of that activity. The COVID money is also paying for some young people to participate in the Fire Reach programme that was discussed at Police and Fire Cabinet as well recently, and that's happening in the next week or so, I think. So that's a kind of week intensive programme which will aim to address some of the fire raising challenges that we've seen as well. So absolutely, going forward, this resource will help with that piece of work, and we're very engaged with all of those partners looking at the issues that have arisen this week in the media.
That's great.
Thanks.
Just one other question. Put my mic on again. The page 60 EREC homeless response. I mean, it's great to see £100,000, you know, being spent in support for vulnerable individuals. I mean, the point I'm making here, it says, you know, the support families with additional cost pressures associated with homelessness, i.e. transport, food, materials for emergency accommodation. I mean, I'm led to believe, and maybe Phil could correct me if I'm right or wrong here, we've got 31 families or individuals now staying in short stay accommodation, bed and breakfast, basically, out with East Renfrewshire, I believe, Renfrewshire, around about the airport, Travelodge. Are these individuals, you know, getting transport costs? Are they getting, you know, support, you know, from this funding?
Sorry, Councillor Devlin, are you asking if this fund will be used for such purposes?
Yeah.
They are the kind of things that we need to look at, yes. But
The reason I'm asking, I mean, down beside the airport, and she was telling me she's got to get a couple of buses to get her kids to school in the morning, and a couple of buses to get her kids home at night. I mean, surely part of this funding can be used for these costs.
I guess the idea behind some of these funding was to allow teams flexible resource to address such things as you're talking about. So the examples that we've given here under that item are about transport, food, materials and transport. So we'll be looking at cases like that where people are in need and experiencing those pressures and using the funding flexibly. So that's been the advantage of the COVID resource, to give teams that flexibility where they haven't had it previously. So yes, I'm sure they'll be looking at that, and we're happy to take that case away and have a look at that with you.
Are they actually giving them funding an hour? Have you still to look at it to see if there are any families put in there will receive funding?
could I come back to you separately under that, and I'll provide you a response within the next 24 hours?
I think the Chief Executive would like to come in on this.
Thanks, Councillor, for your question. And if there's in relation to any specific family in respect of transport to schools, if you either want to pass it on to myself or indeed Mark Ratter, Director of Education, we'll certainly look at any specific families and to ensure that where there's a policy for transport, that if they meet the policy, then we will ensure that transport is arranged to school where it fits in with council policy. So if you get me any names, we can take that forward for you. Thank you. Basically, due to the rising costs and homeless, I'm led to believe I've got, I believe, roughly 350 applicants, homeless applicants now in our register. We've got 31 families or individuals in bed and breakfast accommodation. Have we got a worker that's supporting these families, especially in the bed and breakfast accommodation?
Yes, we do, Councillor Devlin. We do.
Well, surely the worker should be, explaining to the homeless applicant that's in the short stay accommodation, if you're taking kids to school, there should be in place a fund that will allow you to not be out of pocket.
Okay, I'll come back to you within 24 hours on all of those questions, Councillor Devlin.
Sorry, it's, saying somebody, if they're paying for transport to get their kids to school, I mean, the point I'm making is before they even are out of pocket, we should step in and make sure they're not out of pocket.
I think the point's been noted and will be followed up once you provide the details to officers. Thanks very much, Councillor Devlin. Councillor Anderson.
Thanks, Leader. I'd like to echo actually the comments that both my colleagues have made in terms of the good work that's been happening here. There was one key thing that for me, and I can appreciate to see the focus on the exit strategies for people, because beyond this is the long-term, the alternative funding. So glad to see that. Also, in particular for me, the emphasis on children and young people and the most vulnerable, and the effect, the impact long-term that it's had on them. I'm very glad to see the aftercare for the care leavers support, and the back to school bank as well. Cost of living crisis now, with uniforms and everything, and the final one I think was the extended work on the early years language and social communication. Again, for vulnerable individuals, very glad to see that. Just want to acknowledge that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Just to summarise, Julie and Louise, really thank you for this very, very detailed paper, and also to thank the dedication of our council team to provide the best range of interventions possible to support our residents at this very difficult time of a cost of living crisis. There are actually, we've highlighted a few individual points, but there are actually too many individual projects to mention on this list, as they've all been valuable and they've all had an impact. Whether it's in direct hardship payments, help for our elderly, benefits uptake programme, all helping to put much needed cash into people's pockets to pay their bills during this cost of living crisis. And also the work to support our food banks as well, which should not be missed. Or the education catch-up progress, particularly in our primary schools. And of course, the support to our HSEP, which is still seeing the continued impact of COVID on the complexity of the cases which they are having to deal with. In particular, I would like to commend the partnership working behind these programmes. This has affected all of council departments, whether it's communities, equalities, payments teams, money advice and rights team, education, housing, environment, and our HSCP. It's also included significant partnership working across the community planning partnership with police, fire has been mentioned, third sector partners such as Voluntary Action, East Renfrewshire, Barhead Housing and Citizen Advice Bureau. And I hope I haven't excluded anyone, but there's probably a number of other organisations as well that have been involved with this as well. I would also like to thank our fellow council members on the Cost of Living Members Officer Working Group, who showed such a keen interest and desire to help shape the most appropriate interventions we could do with the funds available. So I'd just really like to thank Louise and Julie and all the teams. This has been a lot of hard work getting these programmes up and running, and you forget the time and effort and coordination and all of the meetings behind the scenes in order to deliver these programmes. So I really thank you very much for this paper, and it will be very welcome to the residents of East Renfrewshire. Thank you very much. So with that, if we can move on to the next item on the agenda, which is item number 5, HRA land sale located at Springfield Road, and this report is by Phil Dawes. Thank you, Phil.
Thank you. The purpose of this report is to seek approval in accordance with contract standing orders to vary an existing contract with Ironside Farrer Consultants, who are acting for the Council in relation to the sale of land at Springfield Road, Barhead. Members will be aware of the report that was considered and approved by Council on the 28th of June to progress and complete the disposal of land allocated located at Springfield Road. Ironside Farrer were appointed to assist preparations for the sale of the land at Barhead South under a consultancy framework fee of £115,000. Their initial appointment included both master planning advice and technical investigations, including matters such as pre-application consultation, infrastructure investigations, reports on environmental conditions, etc. This brought the current commitment to Ironside Farrer to £118,000. We now require additional advice from them to review the developer's site investigation scope and proposals. That work will continue to take place until 2023 at an additional cost of £9,875. That brings the total commitment to Ironside Farrer to £128,000. Now that's £12,750 above the previous commitment, which is 11% above the contract value of £115,000. Contract standing orders note that if a contract is to be varied by a sum in excess of 10%, it requires to be referred to the Chief Officer, Legal and Procurement, for consideration of its legal implications, and then, if sanctioned, must be reported to Cabinet for approval. So we have gone through this process. It's above 10%, because obviously it's 11%. The Chief Officer, Legal and Procurement, has sanctioned the variation as being appropriate, so consequently Cabinet approval is sought to vary the value of the contract, and as such I recommend this report to Cabinet.
Thank you very much, Phil. Any questions on this? Councillor Anderson.
Thanks, Leader. Thanks, Phil. It's a very specific question, obviously, and just to ensure my understanding of it, and there was an underspend of 6,500, but now there's an overspend, and it's very specifically because of to support the technical advice around the district valuer's consideration of value. So am I right to say then that this allows us to conclude the deal, hopefully, with this further advice and technical advice?
That's correct, yes. We hope to conclude the deal in the next couple of months.
And this should ensure that it goes through as...
Yes, that's correct. We think it's a prudent use of an additional just under £10,000 to ensure we get the appropriate advice. It's a relatively substantial sum of money involved, and as such the £10,000 is money well spent to ensure we have the appropriate advice.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. Thanks.
Councillor Devlin.
Thanks, Leader. Just a question, and you mentioned there, Phil, once we conclude the deal.
So just to interrupt, could the report that was discussed at Council was an exempt paper, so we need to be wary about what we say in relation to any financial bids.
Thanks for that, Phil. Yeah, exactly. Why don't you take that offline?
I'll speak to you offline.
Okay. Okay. Thanks for that. So unless exactly, don't want to get us in trouble.
I'm glad that was your question and not mine.
So if we can go to if there's no other questions, we can go to the recommendation. And Cabinet is recommended to approve the request to vary the existing contract with Ironside Farrer. Are we happy with that? Agreed. Thank you very much. And that concludes the Cabinet meeting for today. Thank you very much.